this has been an interesting project for me. Honor your father and your mother. What does that mean for incest survivors? I have asked 8 different Christians um, that I've known through
Hmm.
different ways if they would be on the podcast, and none of them were willing to. A couple of them just didn't want to be on camera, but basically what happened was the ministers would say you need to talk to a mental health professional, and the Christian mental health professionals would say you need to talk to an ordained minister. So, and I actually talked to someone yesterday from our synagogue, a mental health professional, who said, you need to, there's a certain rabbi that she knew who specializes in this sort of thing.
I am Joshua Samuels. I'm the rabbi, spiritual leader at Congregation Beth Israel in Bellingham, Washington. And I've been here for a little over 14 years, originally from San Francisco, but this is home, and I love it.
Do you have any initial thoughts coming into it? What do you think honor your father and your mother means for an incest survivor?
Mm. So, first, thanks for having me, and I'm glad that I'm the one clergy person who who accepted your invitation. So in Judaism, this is a real commandment. It's a real mitzvah. It's serious. It's central. It's one of the big 10, even though there are 613. It's part of the Ten Commandments. Those are not more important than any others, but they're kind of central in our tradition and in Western faith traditions. But it's not simplistic. Classically, Jewish law understands honor as concrete actions, making sure a parent has what they need, speaking respectfully to them about them, not humiliating them, either in front of them or behind their back, and helping with practical care matters when appropriate. But Jewish tradition also doesn't ask a person to cooperate with their own harm. And so if a parent is unsafe, physically unsafe, emotionally abusive, sexually violent, then the how of this mitzvah changes dramatically. And sometimes the most Jewish, most faithful way to keep a mitzvah is with distance, boundaries, and support. And so there's situations when the child cannot be in contact with the parent and cannot fulfill this mitzvah, and that is okay. And Judaism recognizes that. So yes, the mitzvah is constant, but the application of the mitzvah is really situational because the Torah commands us above all to preserve life, to prevent harm, and not enable wrongdoing, and all of that takes precedence over the mitzvah to honor one's parents.
My husband, um, who has always been Jewish, that's basically what he said
Mm,
is like you're not supposed to disobey the law, but if there's someone with a life-threatening condition, there's no ambulance available, you're still gonna break the speed limit to get that person to the hospital.
mhm.
And so that there are things that are situational. In his particular situation, it was easy to honor his mother and his
Mhm.
father because they were very honorable people.
Yeah.
And one thing getting ready for this, I struggled with is we're also told to be truthful and honest.
Yes.
So honoring a dishonorable person, to me, I mean, I realized I value honesty more than I do really any of the other commandments.
Hmm.
It's important to me to live with integrity and honesty.
Yeah.
And I got some comments from off the internet from a private Facebook group when I asked this question. Has the verse honor your father and your mother ever hurt you? Have you ever been hurt by the words honor your mother and your father? One
Mm-hmm.
person said, yes, that's why I'm agnostic. And so I realized like I would rather, it was one of the few times in my entire life that I thought about not believing in God because it's like I'm going to honor integrity more if I'm expected to worship a being that wants me to honor dishonorable people, then I can't do that.
Right.
But it did give me kind of, because how I interpret, how I think of the Torah, or as I
Hmm.
call it, the Old Testament, or any of the Bible, is I was raised with its word for word.
Mm.
Um, every word of it comes directly from God. And so I was also taught that there were no dinosaurs because that conflicts with the 7 day creation. And um, and then it was even like, well, what about fossils? And so my husband was asking me, well, what did you think about fossils? Oh, God put them there so people, it doesn't even make
Hmm.
sense. And so I
Right.
was saying things that don't even make sense. And so I realized my allegiance is to God, um, not to words from any text,
Mm.
even text that I consider holy.
Sure.
And but believing in God is so central to who I am because I have a relationship with God where I feel like God leads me and guides me and
Mm.
comforts me and really does everything that a parent should do. And that's always been my relationship with God.
Hmm.
Um,
I'm
okay,
glad you have that
thank
relationship in your life.
you. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, yeah, it means a lot to me. Um, so we talked briefly about how I said I don't believe all of the Torah, and you said you didn't either. Can you tell more about that?
Uh, so I don't believe in all of the Torah. Is that the question? Do I believe in?
I said something like I believe in God, but even if that means not meaning believing all of the Torah, and you
Oh,
said
sure.
you can relate to that too.
Sure. So for me, the Torah is, our sacred text. We have several sacred texts in the Jewish tradition, and the Torah is central. Everything stems from the Torah. Uh, but, I'm of the opinion that it was written, composed, edited mostly by men, probably by men over generations and taught by men to men for countless generations. And, even if I don't think it was written by the hand of God, which I don't believe that would even be possible with my own concept of God, it's still a sacred text because the Jewish people have been learning from it and teaching it for countless generations. And there's so much wisdom in there. We have the whole array of mitzvot, which are guidelines for how we can live a better, more ethical life. And there's wonderful stories in there that are basically like a mirror to our own lives, where there's no perfect individual in the Torah, in the Jewish Bible. And so we're looking at all these imperfect people and we learn about how we should live based on, what they are doing in the story. So there's it's such a rich text, but I don't think it needs to be written by the hand of God for it to be sacred.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great answer. So, you alluded to your concept of God. Could you say a little more about that?
Sure. Well, my concept of God is ever changing, just like hopefully everyone's is, because no one can really know God. In my opinion, God is beyond human comprehension. But I tend to think about God in the mystical way, in a more Kabbalistic way, which is that everything is God and we're just part of it. And so there's nothing that is not God. And so in that way, it's you can't have a personal relationship with that which you are a part of. It's kind of like a cell in your body. It's part of you, but you can't communicate with it, have a personal relationship with that tiny cell. That's kind of how I view God. Everything in the whole cosmos, it's all God. And that to me is comforting. It makes me think that it's all one and everything is connected. But, there are problems with that in the sense of, when people try to communicate with God and pray, then that's harder than when you think of God as a separate entity. There's this chasm between us, and we're trying to, bring God closer to us, which is more of a Western religious concept. But, who knows how my concept and relationship with God will change over the next year.
Okay, very good. I sent you some questions that were kind of picky questions, like, but um, is
Go
a
ahead.
sperm donor a parent?
Uh, all right. So that's interesting. So is the sperm donor anonymous or not?
Anonymous.
A father, right? So I mean, I'd separate this probably into like biology and relationship or obligation. So biologically, there's obviously genetic contribution, but father in the sense of the mitzvah is bound up with parenting, responsibility, and the lived relationship. So in cases of like anonymous donation, there usually isn't a relationship or parental role. So I wouldn't, you know, I would not frame Judaism as demanding someone to go find him so you can honor him, right? That can be like emotionally disruptive, and it's not what this mitzvah I think is trying to create. But I think if a person later learns about an identity and wants to approach this with maturity and good faith, that is welcome. But Judaism doesn't force an intimacy that doesn't exist. It certainly doesn't, demand that someone destabilize their life or someone else's life to fulfill a mitzvah in a way that the Torah never explicitly required or would never have thought of, thousands of years ago. And so in Judaism, the person who raises you and loves you is your parent, whether or not they are bound to you by DNA.
Okay. And for that's what I believe for adults too. I mean, you're still nurtured by, you still can be and hopefully are in some way nurtured and cherished by a
Hmm.
parent, but the people who do that for me are not biologically connected
Right.
to me.
Sure.
And so I do feel a sense of honoring the people who nurture me still.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, and yeah, and so so that would be the same answer for anything about adoption. Although then with adoption, sometimes you get, with older child adoption, you get one parent who has nurtured, the biological parent has nurtured for a part of the life, and then another parent nurtures after that, and
Hmm.
it's more complex. Okay.
Yeah, there's all different types of family units. And so I think, Jewish tradition probably can hold two truths at the same time that, biological parents have a real status, right? There's a fact of origin there, but then, the people who raise you also have a profound claim on your gratitude and care. So, um, the adoptive parents who actually parented you deserve honor and gratitude, right? So if someone was raised by adoptive parents who fed them, protect them, showed up, sacrificed for them, Judaism would say honoring them is not only appropriate, it's deeply Jewish. And for many people that's also emotionally, truthful, right? The ones who acted um, like parents are the ones you can actually relate to as parents.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. Um, is there any?
There's a value. I'm just thinking. There's a value called hakarat hatov, and it just means recognizing the good done for you. And that's a really important value in Judaism. And so whoever, you know, bestows good on you or helps you, you're supposed to acknowledge that.
Oh, here's one of the things from that someone wrote on the internet. There's a balance on all Torah commands. It is never intended to give ultimate power to the parents as demigods. People just get twisted up because they want to be their own gods. Yeah. So you would agree with that. Yeah.
Hmm.
Someone wrote, my therapist said the way to honor my father and my mother is to grow up. And I think putting a lot of it's what you've been saying too, putting emphasis on your own healing and your own
Hmm.
um, well-being is honoring. I think of that as my way of honoring my ancestors because
Hmm.
there's been many generations of child abuse,
Yeah,
but at some point, my ancestors were not child abusers, and
right.
so by me being a good person who parents who treats children right, that I honor them, and I actually honor the ones who were abusers too, because it it breaks this cycle that is
Hmm.
bad.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
I
Um,
think, yeah, there's many different ways you can interpret this mitzvah, this commandment. And, first of all, Jews, we have these as guideposts for life, but it's not like anyone follows every single commandment, mitzvah to a T. There's plenty that I don't follow, for reasons that I'm okay with. And so if this was one that I was not comfortable with following, honoring one's parents, I would not do it and I would not feel bad about it. And there's no Jewish jail that you would go to for not observing a certain mitzvah or another. And so, I think Judaism gives you a little bit of latitude in that way, whereas these are directions for how to live a healthy life. But if a mitzvah is going to, you know, uh, put you in any kind of emotional distress, then by all means, skip it.
very
Or
good.
or figure out how you can adapt it, such as honoring ancestors who came before your parents or grandparents. What do I know about them? How can I honor the legacy that they left behind, uh, or any other way?
I think you kind of already answered this, but could it be considered dishonest to honor a dishonorable parent? In other words, might you be breaking another one of the Ten Commandments?
Hmm, that's an interesting question. Are you breaking another commandment by honoring a dishonorable person? Um, I'd not thought about that before. I mean, there's no specific mitzvah uh, about that. That's really complicated. Hopefully, there's a reason that you're honoring a certain individual. Um, there are probably a lot of people that we honor in our lives in public life that have been dishonorable, at times. And so that's a difficult question to answer, but there's nothing specifically Jewish about, that response. I think it's really individual whether someone feels the need to honor that individual.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think about, well, I interviewed someone last week who I'm doing a project on recovered memories, and He lives in the UK,
Hmm.
and he recalled just extreme abuse that I think he didn't, maybe he still doesn't know if his mother was aware of him being abused at that time, but he said, I've got to go to the police with this
Hmm.
information. And she said, your job is to protect me.
Mm.
It was really interesting because it wasn't like she should be protective toward him. He should be protective toward her. And that would mean disobeying the laws of the land, really. I
Right.
mean, we when we know of a crime,
Hmm.
we're supposed we're our I th- I'm sure this is of any religion, you're supposed to be protective of other people, and if you know of crimes being committed, reporting them is a way.
Right. I mean, not only that, but in Judaism, we have this saying that comes from the Talmud that the land of the law is the law of the land is the law. And so that takes precedence over Jewish law. And so if they come in
Oh,
conflict, you're supposed to follow the laws of the land, the country, the community that you are a part of.
oh,
And
that's
so,
interesting. I didn't
yeah.
know that.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. There was case. I don't know if you followed the case, but someone um, hired hitmen to murder her son-in-law when
Mm.
they were getting a divorce, and she and so the family's all Jewish and oh, both sides, and so she called her son and said, "Don't talk to the FBI, don't talk to the law enforcement," and he's like, "I already did, and I wouldn't not talk to law enforcement based on." I mean, I'm always going to talk openly if if law enforcement wants to talk to me. So he ended up testifying against his own mother, who is in prison from now on.
Hmm.
Um,
Good
and
for him.
yeah, yeah, that's what. Yeah, to me, he was honoring his. Well, he was being honorable,
Right.
and that's what one of my friends says. And I heard a sermon many, many years ago that the way to honor your parents is to be honorable.
Hmm.
Living an
I like that.
honorable life honors them.
Hmm.
Okay. Um, any more thoughts? Can you tell me, and you already did some, but what does the word honor mean?
So, what does the word honor mean? It's a good question. I'd say, that being an honorable person or honoring someone, this could be, living with decency, integrity, compassion. Uh, you can be a profoundly honorable person and still decide, just talking about the subject we're talking about, like for my safety and healing, I can't have contact with certain people, and that can still be consistent with the mitzvah as Judaism understands it. Uh, but the Hebrew for honor is kavod, and to to bestow kavod on someone is it's a high honor, uh, and so you don't want to just think about honoring someone for no reason. People should deserve your kavod.
Okay.
They have to earn it.
Well, that goes along with one of the internet.
Hmm.
It's really what you're saying. I do not honor people who aren't worth honoring, and
Right.
that goes along with that.
They've given up that claim.
Yes. Yes. Okay. And oh, now I'm curious, and I'm just curious. I don't know that I'll include this, but so you talked about your concept of God, but like it seems to me like in the Psalms, David had quite a communication with God. I
Hmm.
mean, to me, it seems very similar to what
Sure.
God directs me, God comforts me, God.
Hmm.
I mean, mine's pretty mystical in that I've had
Mm-hmm.
experiences where I believe I could feel God's
Mm-hmm.
touch. I mean, literally touch. But I know I'm a mystic, and most religions have there's some form of mysticism. But not regarding the mysticism necessarily,
Mm-hmm.
but did it seem to you, does it seem to you like King David had the kind of relationship with God where God that was really personal?
Well, not only King David, pretty much all of the major characters in
Yes,
this story, going all the way back to the book of Genesis,
yes.
had deeply personal, one-on-one relationships with God. Um, but again, it depends whether who you think authored these these sacred
Got it.
texts, and if you think that God, dictated this all to Moses, and
Yes.
it's from God, then you have to say to yourself, well, then I do believe that uh, one can have a personal, deeply fulfilling relationship with God. But if one thinks that perhaps this was, teaching texts written by individuals, human beings, then I think you can think otherwise, and that's just as valid as what they were thinking because they were no different than me or you.
Yes, I that puts so my thoughts are that these words were put down by some people who had this direct experience
Mhm.
with God. And then they're, I mean, if you've had this direct experience of God, it's hard to deny that it exists. I can't deny that it
Sure.
exists. But if you haven't had that experience, then it's hard to believe it exists because it seems really
Hmm.
um, odd. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
But you have a whole bunch of texts in the Torah or in the Hebrew Bible, like from Psalms, where they talk about God being close to the brokenhearted, God healing, binding up wounds, spiritual, emotional wounds. In the book of Exodus, God hears the cry of the afflicted. I've seen their suffering. And so many of the texts that we have in the Jewish tradition paint a picture of this God who is close to individuals, and that at times can be really comforting and needed.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Anything else you want to say on camera?
No, I'm just really happy to have been asked to have a conversation with you, Mary. I've known you for several years, and I know this topic is, this is a passion project for you, and I'm honored that you asked to include me in it.